Okay, Crackerjack Powwow is the title of this installment of Ezekiel Kralen's story about the two dogs in his life and the crackhead who takes advantage of him for money, and all the details of the story, homelessness and homefulness. Ezekiel Kralen wrote, email posts for December 14, subject, awesome meetup. But before I get to today's report, let's go back to the last time Deke dropped by 2 days ago when he threatened and screamed at me. 3 more annoying incidents I didn't mention, just for the record. 1, Deke had given me a gift card he found that can be used at certain department stores, claimed it had a value of $51, so handed it to me and said, visit the card's website, input its numbers to verify. The instructions on the back were too tiny to read, so I just took it and said okay. Later on, I snapped a picture of both sides, then read everything in enlarged format on my screen. It didn't even have a website to go to, and the required name on the front had been scraped off, thus the card was no good. See for yourself. So I held on to it, and the first thing he said to me this morning after calling up to the window was, did you check that card? Yes, but it's no good, Deke, I called back. What? No, it's got to be good, he exclaimed. Didn't you go to the website? Not pleased with him starting an argument by hollering up to my window, I said, I'll be right down and show him. Upon handing it over, he said, while feigning to read off the card, to check your current amount, visit our website. Then attempted to hand it back and said, see, it's right there. No, it doesn't say anything like that, Deke, I answered, knowing he made that up on the fly. Besides, the customer name has been rubbed off, and without that it's no good. But even if it wasn't, you'd need some picture ID that matches the name anyway. He then squinted down the card and actually read the instructions out loud to discover there was no website mentioned. Of course, he didn't apologize, but tossed it and moved on to something else, which was breaking open another bag of damp shake and spreading it over a large sheet of cardboard by his cart and the doggies. Though I was impressed with his reading skills, he read every single word correctly, so he's a better reader than he led me to believe, the little skunk. As for the card's $51 value, I have no idea how he came up with that. 2. A while later, after my serving the dogs food and water, Deke asked, so why did you tell me the other day that housing is a human right? No one just gets free housing in Louisiana. Everyone there works. That's not true, I replied. The state's one of the worst. That state's one of the worst, like all the southern states. So many people are without jobs or housing, and it's not their fault. Free housing for the poor gives them a leg up. It's unspeakably cruel to expect anyone who's homeless to hold down a job. Folks in your state are in a bad way. Nah, that's crazy, he retorted, like he just sucked a lemon. The government's not going to give everyone free housing so they can hang out in their homes and not look for work. Most people want to work anyway, Deke, I explained with a twinge of exasperation. It's in the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution that all citizens have a right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Better wages would certainly motivate them. I was about to elaborate upon that, what it means in day-to-day terms, such as the right to universal health care, a good education, decent housing for everyone, including the poorest, etc., but he cut me off and continued this ridiculous tirade about how free houses don't even make sense. Seeing that he wasn't interested in what I had to say, but just wanted to gripe, I threw up my hands and exclaimed, never mind, you know everything, you're the last word, stay ignorant, see if I care. I'm not ignorant, he mumbled while picking seeds and twigs from the shake as he sat there, Indian style. Oh, yes, you are, I replied, but you always cut me off whenever I try to answer a reasonable question, so I give up. You're the lousiest listener I've ever met. You talk and think like someone who dropped out of school after the 6th grade. So I returned to my hovel in resigned frustration, but thought about his superb reading of the fine print on that card, concluding he's a lot smarter than he lets on, but loves to get under my skin for the fun of it. Ergo, he agrees that housing is a basic human right, or IOW. As my Bodhisattva guardian, he gave me yet another clue that all is not what it seems, in this case about him. 3. He said Boulevard Joe was now living indoors, but sharing a room with 2 others. Joe told him his things got stolen. Then Deke told me that's the usual arrangement for emergency housing, 2, 3, or 4 to a unit. Not always, Deke, I replied. Arrangements may vary across the city, and those tiny homes are for just 1 person each. I knew Deke was conjuring up excuses not to move ahead with getting off the street, so started painting a totally negative picture, but at least I know now why I haven't seen Joe in the past few weeks, or anyone else from his crowd. But this conversation was before those two shelter advocates showed up for a brief friendly talk with him. Oops, I almost forgot to mention the Crackerjack toy in that meetup 2 days ago, Watson. When I first stepped out to greet the pups and their master, Lucky instantly flopped on his back and started wriggling to and fro in sheer joy for my presence. Flacco quickly followed suit. They were in perfect sync, like a pair of Rockettes, adorable. Of course, I crouched down and snuggled my face between theirs while scritching both bellies. Now, as I've mentioned before, it's rarely Flacco's habit to squirm on her back. That's her brother's shtick. So I've only seen her do it twice before in all their years together. Obviously, she sees the attention Lucky gets from me when he does that, so competes for my love. In fact, I've never seen her do that spontaneously, but only after Lucky starts in. They charm me to pieces. Artemis willing, they will all three soon have a comfy sanctuary of their own, warm and safe and happy. Now, speed forward to today. He had another speaker, this time shaped like an oversized bread box, though black in color all around, but what was so delightful about it was a large sticker on one side depicting Rick and Morty as homies hanging out together, one arm around the other. I wish I'd taken a snapshot to show you, but maybe I'll have another chance. I don't think he even knows who Rick and Morty are, as he never watches TV, nor has had a real home for decades in which he could. I was impressed by Deke's humble demeanor when he asked, "Can I get some money today?" So I replied, "Well, if you insist." Had he resumed his diatribe about my breaking his pocket radio or brought up any other false accusation, my response would have been quite different, and he'd have had to do without his next payment, in whole or in part. In other words, he'd never see it again. His approach was better than apology, and I'm sure he respects my not rubbing Monday's nasty behavior in his face. In fact, I didn't bring it up at all, as if it never happened. I think my returning his muggy weed I had been curing for him, as well as his electronics sooner than scheduled that day, were adequate reprimand. As he settled down with his shake on the cardboard, I saw that the pups were left to rest on the concrete, not a single thought for their comfort, these little darlings who deserve every kindness in the world. He had 3 shopping carts this time, one half filled with empty bottles and crushed cans. Another cart stuffed with clothing, had a large thin bedspread, partly hanging over one corner, the one he had left behind a week ago, in which I took hovel for another time the mutts needed it, which was 2 days back. Time to use it again, I thought, so I walked over to it and asked him, "Can I lay this down for the dogs?" He didn't look up, but continued to sort through the shake, muttering what I thought was, "Okay, go ahead," though I couldn't be sure because the traffic flow caused a rumbling din. However, his body language, that included a blasé shrug of the shoulders, struck me as yes. Lucky was already curled up on the bottom shelf of that same shopping cart, cold, hard plastic, while Flacco was sitting up on the sidewalk beside her master. But at least the pups had new sweaters on, which were delivered by Amazon only last night. The bedspread was light brown, and though thin, once rumpled up into a pile, was sufficiently cushy. I placed over half of it on that lower shelf, which delighted Lucky no end, and he soon dozed off. I allowed the remainder to flow down onto the concrete in case his sister wanted to rest on a piece of it too. She did not. So I went to the basement of my building and procured a flattened cardboard box for her to lie down on. Later on, Deke had tossed a thick swath of cloth for Flacco atop her cardboard pallet. Gee, how gracious of him. So much plush material in one cart, yet barely a scrap for them. But our meet-up was peaceful, no drama except towards the end, when he was preparing to depart. He yanked the bedspread unceremoniously from beneath Lucky, who jumped off out of necessity, and griped at me. "I told you not to give him this, but you paw through my cart and do it anyway." "Well, I asked you and thought you said okay," I replied, "but you mumble your words sometimes, and the traffic din didn't help either." I then noticed Lucky attempting to finish off what little food remained in one dish, but the kibble was stuck together, and all he could do was push the bowl around. So I crouched down and used my fingers to break it up. "What are you feeding him now?" Deke grouched. "Nothing," I replied. The food was stuck together, so I just loosened it for him. As I held the bowl in place so Lucky wouldn't have to follow it around, Deke then blurted, "You're such a great activist. How come nobody knows you?" "Most activists do their work in the background," I replied. "Only a few get well known, Deke. Besides, it's for my own protection." "Protection?" he squawked. "Protection from what?" "The city protects me by keeping me under wraps," I explained. If I got well known before my time, I'd have been shot years ago. I like to say I'm San Francisco's best-kept secret. So best-kept, in fact, I didn't even know it myself until quite recently. He mulled that over with a grumbling undercurrent, then decided to bring up Michael Savage, king of hate talk radio again, because he knows that upsets me. Michael Savage is an activist, and everyone knows him. All my friends like him, except you. Doesn't sound to me like any friends I'd care to know, I quipped. Savage lives up to his surname because he's downright wicked. He's what? Dick queried, as if he couldn't hear. Wicked, I answered back. What? He pressed again. He's fucking evil, I replied, figuring he might not know what wicked means. Either that or Dick's just trying to needle me further. At any rate, he dropped the subject and asked for a razor and a black marker. So I returned to Hovel to procure them. I also decided to bring down one of the 2 sleeping bags I ordered from Amazon almost 3 weeks ago. They were still tightly rolled up in their original clear plastic wrap. What's that? He said as I handed him the razor and marker. A sleeping bag to keep the dogs warm at night, I replied, but it looks like you have plenty of stuff to keep them warm, so maybe I'll hold on to it for another time. No, I could use it, he replied, so I tossed it onto one of his carts. I petted and hugged the mutts again, then stood up and said, anything else to complain about before I step inside? In which case I'll just stand here and listen. He immediately went off on a tirade, how he's going to sue the fuck out of me for writing about him and the dogs. He's got a lawyer now because of another lawsuit for when he got run over and it broke his leg, and he's going to collect $1 million soon. You never got run over, Deke, or broke your leg, I retorted. That's just another of your scams. I was there. You didn't even suffer a scratch. In fact, you were pissed at me for calling 911. Well, that just got his dander up further, and he warned me again with impressive pomposity. I'm going to sue the fuck out of you, Zeke. Just wait and see. Fine with me, I said with a shrug. You think that's funny? You'll die on the streets bawling your eyes out, he added for dramatic effect. Whatever, I replied. I'm going home now. God bless your little family and happy trails. I then turned away and proceeded toward the front gate. I don't know what else he was gibbering on about since I ignored him, but just before I entered the building, I called out once more, God bless you. Well, I asked for it this time, didn't I, good physician, and he gave it to me in spades. A pretty damn good meet-up, all in all. And there was Flacco gazing at me from a distance, radiating so much love in my direction, yet she didn't make a single stir to run up to me, as she knows there's a good reason I can't bring the pups over. So she just sat there, all noble, with chest puffed out and brimming with pride regardless. What good little soldiers those proxy doxies truly are. 8 Reasons to Stop the War to MCN announcement list. Jaded Ernie posted calling for a Christmas truce. I replied, I'm sure Moscow will be very touched by watching this video and will call for an immediate ceasefire over the Christmas season and through New Year's Day. If it's one thing Vladimir Putin has a soft spot for, it's YouTube videos in the name of peace. So if you really want to end this horrid war for good, post an email to Putin with a link to my Brindlekin Tales channel. In fact, my tales will end all wars once they flutter across the globe like cyber doves, and a tsunami of donations floods my PayPal account. The Christmas Fairy, a poem, to MCN announcement list. Judas Saccoshit posted, Oh, simple thing, where have you gone? Why have you disappeared? I replied, the Xmas Tree Fairy tested positive for COVID 2 days ago and will be living in isolation in an undisclosed Motel 6 room for 2 or 3 more weeks. She apologizes to all her fans who paid Ticketmaster to see her on stage this weekend in Placerville and promises to refund all purchasers. She also regrets her anti-vax, anti-mask position that had led to this health crisis. Her cousin, the Tooth Fairy, contracted the virus from her and has recently passed as a sad result. So no more putting your tooth under a pillow, okay, kids? Just stick it in a Ziploc baggie and toss it into the trash to avoid any spread of harmful bacteria, like any sane person would do. Meanwhile, in her stead, her good frenemy Rumpelstiltskin will stand in for the Xmas Tree Fairy through the Ghoultide season. Unfortunately, he deplores children and is known to eat them if no other food is close by when he's hungry, but he was the only one available at such short notice. Oh, I almost forgot. He hates cookies. and is lactose intolerant. So forget about leaving them out by the Xmas tree, or he will stomp all over your presents. So we're caught up to Christmas time, I guess, with these stories.